Hi everyone. So in the last video, we saw how we can delete data and select data by a where clause, and we run into an interesting problem now that I want to discuss in terms of how we properly design tables. Because in the previous videos we didn't really see it, but in this one I inserted some different data into the database, and so you can see our employees now, and we have two managers named Michael, both with the same salary, and that gives us a problem. And that problem is that we have no way to uniquely identify one single Michael. They are, no matter what query we could come up with selecting from the database, there is no where clause that would say, oh, grab this one and not this one. And that's an important constraint to have in a database. If we wanted to fire one of these Michaels, we wouldn't be able to. We have no unique constraint. And so it's important to define what's known as a primary key. And a primary key just says what piece of data, or how can I uniquely identify a piece of data in the database. So if you ever thought about it, this is the major reason why you have, say, a student ID or an employee ID. Nobody else will have that same employee ID. That's you. That's your row in the database, or your row in the student database. So I dropped this table, and we're going to recreate it using a primary key. So we're going to create table employees, and we're going to still have name. And keep that a varchar. But what would be better, instead of to be able to uniquely identify, is to add an ID column. And so this is super common. You'll see this a lot in many tables, and it's just kind of default. We'll add an ID column. We'll make it just an integer that goes up to 7. And a useful tool is we can add attributes to data columns. And so a useful attribute for the ID is auto increment, and we'll see what that does in a second. So ID integer 7, auto increment, great. We'll add our position, and then make that a varchar 255, and we'll add our salary back, integer 7, and then we'll close it, comma. Oh, whoops, I forgot to the last important part. So once we have all our commas, or once we have all our columns, not commas, come on. We need to then define which one is going to be our primary key. And so this is a common pattern where we're going to auto increment an ID, and we're going to say at the very end of our table definition, primary key parentheses ID. That just says, hey, this ID column is going to serve as the primary key of this table. So they're all going to be unique, and they will never be the same because we're auto incrementing it. And we'll see what that looks like in a second. Perfect. So now if we go back, and I will insert some people into this database. There we go. Great. Now if we select star from employees, we'll see that every employee now has an ID. And not only that, we didn't have to actually insert that ID. Because we set the ID as auto increment, it automatically, every time we inserted someone, it just uses the next available number. So 1, 2, 3. And so now if we had another manager named Michael, so let's go ahead and go back up to that query. Perfect. they will be uniquely identified. We have two guys named Michael, both managers, both set to 70,000, but this Michael is ID 2 and this one's ID 4. So when we want to grab a single Michael, we can just select star from employees where the ID is equal to, say, 2. And we will only get that unique Michael in the database. So that's how we can uniquely identify these people. So that's an important concept of databases because you want to be able to uniquely identify rows. The primary key doesn't always have to be an ID, and it doesn't even always necessarily have to be a single column, but it's this is a basic course, and using an ID is quite fine, and what we'll probably stick with for the rest of the course. So that's what I got on unique constraints. And so thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.